Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perdichizzi, and thank you for joining me. As always, the time has come. Summer scouting starts today. I have been researching, watching film, looking everything over, taking notes, scouting the quarterbacks over the last couple weeks. That's going to kick off our summer scouting series. Following the quarterbacks, it's actually going to be the tight ends next, then the wide receivers, then the running backs. Our 4-part summer scouting series to get ready for the upcoming college football season, to get prepared from now for your 2025 NFL draft. You're get a head start on your dynasty rookie drafts next year, and to start learning about these prospects that we are going to be talking about here at Saturday Sunday over the next full year as we look towards the upcoming college football season, and then obviously the 2025 NFL draft. As I said, we will kick it off with the quarterbacks tonight. So let's just 1,000 feet overview of what I think about this class right now. It is not the class that we just saw. It doesn't have that star power. It doesn't have the clear-cut, top of the draft quarterback prospects like a Caleb Williams. I don't see a Drake May right now, Jaden Daniels. But let's not forget, a year ago at this time, we didn't think Jaden Daniels was going to be who he was by the time the 2024 NFL draft came around. We didn't think Bo Nix was going to elevate himself into a top 12 pick. We didn't think Michael Penix was going to push himself into the top 10. So I think that what we could say right now is when you look at this quarterback class for next year's draft, do we have a Caleb Williams and a Drake May from now like we did last summer? We don't. But I see plenty of scenarios where we could have guys emerge like Jaden Daniels, where we could have guys emerge like Bo Nix and Michael Penix. And the top guys in this class, they might be looked at similarly to Bo Nix or Michael Penix. But those guys went 8. Those guys went 12. We have guys who I'm going to talk about tonight who could go 8, who can go 12, who could even maybe push to be in the top 5 or even the top 3 or even be the number 1 overall prospect. Are they going to be at the same level as Caleb Williams? Probably not. Are they going to be looked at maybe as the ceiling of a Drake May? Probably not. But every year, every quarterback class is different. If you look at this class, could you have a Jared Goff in this? Could you have a Carson Wentz when he was a productive NFL player? Yeah. Could you have somebody become a Matthew Stafford? Yeah. I think there's guys in this class that could emerge into that. They're not going to be looked at as this complete locked-in franchise quarterback like Caleb Williams was. That we don't have right now in this draft class. But I think we have, when I look at it, I think we have 2 guys who I would think would be right now lock first rounders. I think they could have been first rounders potentially in this past year's draft class, replacing maybe Bo Nix or Michael Penix. We'll see. And I think we have a couple other guys that have traits that if they use this upcoming college football season as a springboard, could see them emerge as first-round quarterback prospects. And that list is about 4 deep here that I think could emerge. And then we have a whole bunch of guys who I think are in that day 2, early day 3 mix. And some of them are going to rise up and maybe solidify themselves as day 2 prospects. Some of them are going to fall. Some of them will return back to college. But I think it's an interesting year. This isn't the Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis type year. This is a more talented class than that. This isn't that. So I'm excited to kind of share my initial rankings. And then I will go through my scouting reports. And these scouting reports are, the basis of the initial, 2025 scouting notebook, which will be in the next wave of S notebooks. But this is initial take. We talk about this every year. A lot changes in the course of another whole year of film. But right now, I'll go through my scouting reports. I'll give you the snapshot of who this player is, their strengths, functional areas, developmental areas, how they win, what I think their current NFL draft projection is, stuff like that. But first, I'll share my rankings. anybody watching on YouTube, when I go through the prospects and talk about them, and I will go in ranking order, I will screen share the Google Sheets document that is the basis of the upcoming 2025 scouting notebook, which is not even released yet. So you will be able to see my scouting reports on that. Obviously, this is a living, breathing document that I update and make changes as soon as I watch more film. Could be week 1, could be more time this summer when I circle back to certain guys. I'll add more guys. So this is not obviously the be and end all of the scouting notebook, even if you watched all 4 episodes that are upcoming. In terms of me sharing that, I'll add a lot of prospects. I'll make a lot of changes. A lot will be modified and adapted along the way. So let's jump right into it. I have watched and ranked 18 quarterbacks. Some of these are some guys that have been lingering from the past that I still, am going to include in here. But I'll share my top 18, and then I'll go through and hit 1 minute, 1.5 minute type scouting reports on each prospect, just to kind of set the stage for where this quarterback class is, heading into the upcoming 2024 college football season. So here are my initial rankings. QB1 for me right now, before the season starts, is Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado. QB2 for me right now is Carson Beck out of Georgia. QB3 for me right now is Quinn Ewers out of Texas. My 4th ranked quarterback entering the college football season for the 2025 NFL draft is Donovan Smith out of Houston. My 5th quarterback is Connor Weigman out of Texas A&M. My 6th ranked quarterback for the 2025 NFL draft before we enter the upcoming college football season is Allar out of Penn State. My 7th ranked quarterback right now is Jalen Milroe out of Alabama. My 8th ranked quarterback is Cameron Ward out of Miami. My 9th ranked quarterback is Jaxson Dart out of Ole Miss. My 10th rated quarterback is Leonard out of Duke. My 11th rated quarterback is Jalen Daniels out of Kansas. My 12th quarterback is Graham Mertz out of Florida. My 13th is Tyler Van Dyke out of Wisconsin. My 14th is Noah Fifita out of Arizona. And my 15th is Dillon Gabriel out of Oregon. Rounding out my top 18 is a couple of guys from the past. DJ Ulangale, who's now at Florida State, started at Clemson, went to Oregon State, back to the ACC with Florida State. KJ Jefferson, who's now of UCF, formerly of Arkansas, and Grayson McCall, formerly of Coastal Carolina, now the starting quarterback for NC State. So that is my top 18 ranked quarterbacks entering the college football season. So I'm going to go through quick hitting scouting reports for most of these quarterback prospects. I'm going to screen share if you're watching on YouTube, just so you can kind of see my notes. Obviously, you'll see me kind of scanning up and down as I go through this. But this is a way of, you can kind of see, how I break down, how I kind of make my reports for these prospects if you're someone who is not a purchaser of the premium notebooks. So let's jump right in. Let me just get set up. As I said a few minutes ago, my number 1 quarterback is Shedeur Sanders. Sanders, obviously from Colorado, coached by his dad, Dion. He's a junior. He's 6'1", 198 pounds. Last year, he threw for 3,230 yards, 27 touchdowns, almost a 70% completion percentage, only 3 interceptions. When I look at Sanders in terms of what I think he could be, average size and frame, doesn't jump out at you. Average arm talent in terms of velocity and strength. But I think he's got really good accuracy and ball placement, especially in the short to intermediate. He's got good athleticism and movement skills to navigate the pocket and throw on the run while playing off structure. He can throw with good touch. He's got good mechanics. He's obviously a great decision maker. Some things that I want to kind of see him take the next step this year. Handling pressure a little bit better. While he made good decisions, I still think he took a lot of sacks. I think he's got to be a little bit quicker to get the ball out and avoid those sacks. He left the pocket sometimes a little bit too quickly. Some of that was obviously due to the offensive line. I think there's some inconsistencies in terms of his vertical ball placement outside the numbers. We didn't see a lot of rushing from him. I think he could be a little bit more incorporated in his game. I think his role at the next level is a starting quarterback, best in spread offense. I think he's going to have a round 1 draft projection in terms of, his fantasy ceiling. If we're spinning that into it, I think he'd be like a low QB1 to high QB2 if he lives up to the billing at the next level. So that is Shedeur Sanders, my number 1 ranked quarterback entering the college football season. Let's go to my number 2 ranked quarterback, and that is Carson Beck out of Georgia. He's a senior, 6'4", 218 pounds. In 2023, threw for 3,941 yards, 72.4% completion percentage, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Very good size and frame, good to very good arm talent in terms of velocity and strength. Effortlessly can drive the ball outside the numbers, vertically down the field. He's got very good accuracy and ball placement. He can throw a good touch and anticipation. He's a good mental processor to work through progressions, very clean mechanics, and footwork with a quick release. Some questions. Lack of mobility. Can he play off structure? Can he throw on the run? How can he handle pressure? There's a lack of creativity and playmaking skills. To me, those are question marks for Carson Beck. He's a traditional pocket passing quarterback, which we just saw CJ Stroud basically be that and thrive at the next level. But that's not the wave of the NFL right now. People are looking for that creativity, looking for that playmaking ability. I'm not sure Carson Beck has that. And that doesn't mean he's not going to be a good NFL quarterback prospect, but I do think it could potentially hinder his upside. And some teams might feel that they want that prospect who could be that creative guy, who could be that playmaker. I think Carson Beck has average athleticism, but I do think that lack of creativity, that lack of playmaking, that lack of playing off structure, it does exist. Some of it maybe we just haven't had even seen him get that opportunity because Georgia is such a strong offensive team, great old line. But I'm interested to see if we see a little bit more of that this year and how he handles that pressure, that playing off structure when things aren't as, perfectly clean as so often he's had there at his time at Georgia. But right now, I look at a guy like Carson Beck, and I think he reminds me a lot of a Matt Ryan, Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins type. That is the kind of quarterback I think we're talking about here. I think he could be a starting quarterback, best in a pro style or spread offense. I have a round 1 projection on him right now. I look at a guy like Carson Beck, and I think him and Shedeur Sanders are the 2 quarterbacks that I was alluding to before that I think right now, if all things go similar to how they went last year, both of these guys would hear their name called in round 1 of the NFL draft. Both of these guys would probably hear their names called ahead of any of the other quarterback prospects. And in that range where personally, I think from what I've seen right now, I have a higher grade on Carson Beck and Shedeur Sanders than I would have put on a guy like Bo Nix. And maybe Michael Penix would have been right behind these two, but it would have been close. But we saw where Michael Penix went. We saw where Bo Nix went. I think Beck and Shedeur Sanders have a higher ceiling than where we saw Penix and Nix go last year. So I think these guys are probably on the trajectory to be top 10 picks in the NFL draft next year. Let's go to my 3rd ranked quarterback, and that is Quinn Ewers of Texas. Redshirt junior, 6'2", 210 pounds. Last year, he threw for 3,479 yards, 69% completion percentage, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Ewers is a guy that has all the physical traits. He has the size, the frame, very good to great arm talent in terms of his velocity and strength. He can make tight window throws. He can make NFL throws. He can push the ball vertically outside the numbers very effortlessly. He can drive the ball in the tight windows. He can throw with touch. He can throw from different arm angles and platforms. Those are all the things to like about Quinn Ewers, who obviously once upon a time, top level recruit. The issues with Ewers has continued to be there's this inconsistency that has kind of hovered over him his entire time he has been in college. The mechanics and the footwork, there's inconsistency there that leads, to bad passes at times. We haven't seen his ability to work through progressions as quickly as you want and as quickly as it would be needed at the NFL level. Mental processing, handling pressure. Those are areas where Ewers still has some difficulty with. You're not going to get a lot in terms of his rushing ability. I think his athleticism and mobility is probably average, but he's not going to be a guy who's going to do a lot in terms of rushing ability or picking up yards with his legs. We haven't seen a lot of anticipatory throws with him. I think there's some issues in terms of reading coverages, pre and post snap decision making. Those are all things that we still need Ewers to take that next step. I think his accuracy and ball placement did start to show signs of improvement this year. I put that under my functional category right now. Same thing with his decision making. But Ewers is a guy that I classify right now as a developmental prospect with high-level traits to still be a starting quarterback, best in a spread offense at the next level. I put a round 1, round 2 grade on him right now. I think he's the third most intriguing quarterback prospect in this class. I think if he puts it all together and keeps Arch Manning on the bench, we could see his stock rise easily into the first round, possibly top 15, top 10. But that's saying that he's going to keep Arch Manning on that sideline. If things go sideways for Quinn Ewers, we're talking about a guy who probably doesn't even end up declaring, probably ends up going the transfer route. So the possibilities of Quinn Ewers go from not coming out and transferring to being a top 10 pick. I really do think that is the spectrum we're talking here with Quinn Ewers, but he has all the physical traits, but there's a lot of quarterbacking aspects that still needs to develop, still needs refinement, and we still need to see him take that next step. I like Ewers. I believe in Ewers in terms of the raw traits, but there's still obviously a lot more to see at the next, before I feel confident that he can make that transition. But I think the NFL will be intrigued with him. If he has another year where he had last year and shows a little bit more growth and development, I still think he's a guy who could be a top 50 pick. If he shows a lot of improvement, I think that pushes into round 1. If he loses his job, then we're talking about maybe a day 3 prospect or probably a guy that transfers and goes to another school to try to rebuild his stock the following year. So there's a lot of ways the Quinn Ewers discussion can go. That's how I kind of see him right now. 4th ranked quarterback for me next up is Donovan Smith out of Houston. Talked about that. He's a guy that I've been talking about on Twitter. Very intriguing prospect is Donovan Smith. Obviously, he is from Houston, a guy that you're not going to see on many people's top 4, top 5 quarterback rankings right now. So this is one of my guys right from the get-go that I'm going a little bit out on a limb, projecting some development and improvement this year and what I think the NFL could view him and think of him moving forward. So Smith out of Houston, he's a senior. He's 6'4". He's 237 pounds. Last year in 2023, he had 2,801 yards passing, completion percentage of 64.5%. He had 22 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. He also helped out with 428 yards rushing and 6 touchdowns. Let's talk about the pluses of why I'm intrigued by Donovan Smith. Great size and frame, great athleticism, rushing ability and mobility to throw on the run, playoff structure, and be a playmaker with his arm and his legs. Very good arm talent in terms of his velocity and strength to make any throw from different platforms. He's got great play strength, toughness, and physicality. You see when people are trying to take him down inside the pocket. You see when he's a runner, great red zone type runner as well, due to that size and frame. When I watched him play, I see so much Dante Culpepper and college Ben Roethlisberger. Now remember, Ben Roethlisberger went to Miami of Ohio, very raw prospect, but I'm talking about the size, the frame, the arm talent, and the athleticism. That's what Ben Roethlisberger had that was really intriguing to NFL teams. I think Culpepper might even be a better comparison as another guy who I think, had a lot of unrefinement to his game as well. But stylistically, that's who I think Donovan Smith, when he's at his best, reminds me of. Now, obviously, there are things to be concerned about. The decision-making, the turnover plays. We don't see him throw with much anticipation right now. A lot of quarterbacking stuff, such as the mental processing, pre- and post-snap reading, going through progressions. I think he's a little slow to read and diagnose. There's some inconsistency in terms of accuracy and ball placement. and his mechanics and footwork need some tightening up and refinement as well. I do think he can. I do think his touch, accuracy, and ball placement are functional, but I think there's room for improvement in a lot of those areas as well. Very similar to Quinn Ewers, I put a NFL role right now fit as a developmental quarterback with upside to become a starting quarterback in a spread offense that incorporates RPO concepts and gets the quarterback moving as well. I think right now I have a day 2 projection on him right now because I think there's even more refinement needed in development in Quinn Ewers. But I think he's got the upside to emerge this year if we see that growth and improvement to be a round 1 prospect due to his physical traits. And you're going to hear this I have a couple guys in my 4 through 6 of my rankings who you're going to hear the same thing. Day 2 projection right now, traits to become a round 1 prospect if things go right this year. And Donovan Smith kind of kicks off that list right now as my 4th ranked quarterback. Next up, Connor Weigman out of Texas A&M. Right out of the debate. Redshirt sophomore, 6'3", 215 pounds. Only has 8 career starts. So this is a major projection in terms of his traits, what I think he could continue to develop and become at the next level. But there's a lot to like about Weigman's game in that small sample size that we have. Last year, he only played 4 games for season-ending injury. He had just under 1,000 yards. He had 979 yards, 68.9 completion percentage, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Stats are really irrelevant when we're talking about Weigman with such a small sample size. Things that I like about him: good size and frame, average to above average athleticism. I think he's got good mobility and pocket presence to navigate the pocket and keep eyes down the field. We don't see young quarterbacks or inexperienced quarterbacks have the ability to do that, navigate the pocket and keep eyes down the field. Weigman can. I think he's got good to very good arm talent in terms of his velocity and strength. He can make any NFL throw. He can put it in the tight windows. He can throw it outside the numbers. He can push it, vertically down the field. He's got the arm talent to do that. I think he's got good accuracy and ball placement, and he can throw with touch. I think he's at areas of development. Lack of experience is right at the top of the list. Talked about only 8 starts prior to the 2024 season kicking off. I do think, while I think his accuracy and ball placement is good, I do think there's some inconsistencies in terms of his vertical ball placement. So while he has the arm talent to do it, I think there's some inconsistencies that I'd like to see a little bit more cleaner in terms of the vertical ball placement and accuracy upcoming this season. I think there's a slight delay in his release. Now, that's not something I've heard anybody else talk about, so maybe I'm just looking at it. But to me, there's a little bit of a slight delay in his release. It's a little elongated. So that's something I'll see if it looks the same when the season starts up. We didn't see him make a lot of anticipatory throws. I think he's still got to work going for progressions a little bit quicker and some inconsistent mechanics. I put the same type of thing on Weigman as I did Donovan Smith. Developmental quarterback, upside to become a starter due to his traits, best in a spread offense. Day 2 draft grade right now, upside to become a round 1 prospect due to his traits. So Connor Weigman, my number 5 ranked quarterback entering the college football season. Number 6, Drew Allar out of Penn State, former big time recruit. Same things I've been saying about Donovan Smith and Connor Weigman. I think you could say a lot of them about Drew Allar as well. Junior out of Penn State, 6'4", 230 pounds. Last year, he threw for 2,631 yards, completion percentage of 59.9, 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, kicked in 210 yards rushing, and 4 touchdowns. Let's get the concerns out of the way first for Drew Allar. Inconsistency. Really struggled in competition against better teams. Very inconsistent in terms of throwing outside the numbers. Has a hard time getting into the timing. Just there's a lot of moments where he just doesn't seem comfortable. Handling pressure. If he has time in the pocket, he looks like a top 5 quarterback prospect. But when there's pressure, I see a lot of concern in terms of him not remaining poised. How can he handle that pressure? Can he show improvement there? There's inconsistency in terms of the accuracy and the ball placement. 59.9 is a very low percentage. Now, I don't get locked into that number because a lot can, it doesn't take a lot to change that, to make that in the mid 60s. And then it's not something we talk about, but it is a low number for a college quarterback to have. There's a lot of inconsistencies in terms of mechanics and his footwork, and I think that only is even more relevant and prevalent when he's under pressure. So those are the areas of Drew Allar that kind of concern me. On the flip side, we're talking about a guy who's got great size and frame. I think he's got average to above average athleticism, mobility, and rushing ability. We've seen him be productive in terms of rushing, in terms of RPO concepts. He's got very good arm talent. This was a top 5 type quarterback recruit, big time recruit, very good arm talent in terms of his velocity and strength to make any throw. He can push it vertically down the field. He can throw outside the numbers. He's got really good play strength, toughness, and physicality. Even while at times he struggled against better teams, struggled against pressure, he takes care of the football. He is a very good decision maker. You see that with only his 2 interceptions last year. Good mental processor who can go through progressions, does pre-snap and post-snap adjustments at the line of scrimmage. That's pretty advanced for a young college quarterback to do that. So you like to see that he's already doing that. Similar to Smith and Weigman, I put a developmental quarterback with upside to become a starting quarterback. I think he probably best in a pro style offense that incorporates RPO concepts a little bit more than a spread. I have a day 2 grade on him with the upside to become a round 1 prospect if all goes well this year. So I had that top 2, which kind of is by themselves in Carson, Beck, and Shedeur Sanders. Then I have the guy who's bordering round 1, round 2 in Quinn Ewers, who has shown more development than the next 3 guys who I just talked about, Smith, Weigman, and Drew Allar, who I think have the talent to become round 1 guys, but they need things. We need to see consistency this year. We need to see more improvement this year, but I do think they have the traits that NFL teams would be being intrigued with to potentially push them up the board. Next up, we go to my 7th rated quarterback, and that is Jalen Milroe out of Alabama. Obviously, Alabama starts their next journey this without Nick Saban. It'll be interesting to kind of see how the offense changes a little bit there with obviously new coaching staff in place. But Milroe out of Alabama, 6'1", 223-pound junior. Last year, he threw for 2,834 yards, 65.8 completion percentage, 23 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, had 531 yards rushing and 12 touchdowns. Only average size at 6'1". Good frame, though, 223. He's put together well. We're talking very good to great athleticism, movement skills, rushing ability, and mobility. We're talking about a playmaker with his arm and his legs. He's got very good arm talent in terms of velocity and strength. He's a very good vertical thrower. He can push the ball vertically down the field. He can push the ball outside the numbers. You love the playmaking ability, playing off structure, throwing on the run. A lot to like there. He's got great play strength and toughness. He's hard to take down. If you just, if you don't wrap him up clean, he's going to break tackles as well. I think in terms of functional areas, I think his accuracy and ball placement are about average. He can throw it some touch. Things that we need to see him take that next step. If we're talking about a guy who right now, I have a round 3, round 4 grade on, ball security issues are big. A lot of fumbles, a lot of taking of sacks. Inconsistent thrown in the intermediate range. While I talked about him being a good vertical thrower, I think in the intermediate range where quarterbacks kind of live most often, he's got to show improvement there. He's got to be able to work through progressions a little bit quicker. How can he handle pressure? The reading defenses, reading coverages, avoiding those sacks, just being an overall better decision maker, cleaning up his mechanics a little bit and his footwork, and showing that it could be a little bit more of an anticipatory thrower and not have to see, a clear, opening before he releases, and pulls the trigger on a pass. Those are the things that kind of want to see him take the next step. I have a developmental backup quarterback with the traits and upside to become a starter in a spread offense that utilizes RPO concepts. I have a round 3, round 4 grade on him. I think he's a guy that if a team takes him in that round 3, round 4 range, they're taking a guy who they want to be, their backup quarterback, and can they catch fire, right? When a team takes a quarterback in the 3rd round, very, very rarely are they expecting that guy to be a starting quarterback. They want him to develop into a good backup quarterback, and then maybe they get lucky, and they're one of those teams that finds their quarterback round 3, round 4, but that is few and far between. So to me, he's a developmental backup quarterback. I just don't think the passing acumen right now is at the upside level of Donovan Smith, Drew Allar, Connor Weigman, which is why I have Milroe behind them and their grade. While I have those guys at day 2 right now, I think some of their physical traits in terms of their passing ability is superior to Milroe right now. But I have Milroe right behind them, round 3, round 4, with the upside to still, bump that up in terms of his draft grade, but just not the same package of traits on the 3 guys I talked about previously. Next up, my number 8 rated quarterback was Cameron Ward, now transferring from Washington State to Miami. I think that's going to give him a big opportunity to showcase his skill this year. I think if he came out last year, he probably would have been a round 4 pick. So now the senior playing for Miami this year, 6'2", 224 pounds. Last year for Washington State, he threw for 3,735 yards, 66.6 completion percentage, 25 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 144 yards rushing, and 8 touchdowns. Good size and frame. I've been talking about Ward now for almost 2 years. I like the player. Good size and frame, good athleticism and mobility to throw on the run, playoff structure. He got a really quick release. He's got the ability to throw from different arm angles and platforms. He's got good arm talent in terms of velocity and strength to push the ball and make NFL throws. I think the accuracy is probably just average, the accuracy and ball placement, but I do think he throws a great touch and has the ability to improvise. The things that I'm still waiting to see more development: reading coverages, mental processing, going through progressions, pocket presence, cleaning up the mechanics and footwork, especially when under pressure, decision making, too aggressive at times, takes too many sacks, a little bit of a low release. He needs to clean up some of that aspects of his game if he wants to emerge as a guy who can maybe be a top 100 pick. If not, I think he kind of falls in that bucket of being, that early round 4 where, if you go back 2 years ago, we saw guys like Stetson Bennett. We saw Aiden O'Connell. We saw Jaron Hall. I think he ends up in that bucket if he doesn't show some improvement. If he shows some improvement, I think he can push his way into the back end of round 3. I think it'll be, I classify him right now as NFL role backup quarterback with the upside to become a starter in the spread offense. Things would have to break right for him to be that starter, but there is aspects of his game. I do like his ability to improvise and create on top of the athleticism, on top of the arm talent. So there are traits there to like, but he needs to show the ability to clean up a few areas in terms of decision-making, aggressiveness, sacks, and then also show that he's got the ability to handle the processing aspect of it. I think there's been some inconsistencies there and not as much growth and development, and he just overly relies on his athleticism and his arm talent, and not enough of the processing aspect, which I think is needed for him to be that complete package and maybe work his way up draft boards. Next up, my number 9 ranked quarterback is Jaxson Dart of Ole Miss. I think he's a guy that you're going to see a little bit higher on other people's rankings. I'm not completely there, but let's talk about Jaxson Dart right now. Senior out of Ole Miss, 6'2", 225 pounds. Last year, 3,364 yards passing, 65.1 completion percentage, 23 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Almost 400 yards rushing and 8 touchdowns. Let's talk about the things that make Dart an intriguing prospect and why other people maybe even have him higher than me on their quarterback board. Average size, good frame, average arm talent in terms of velocity and strength. He's got good athleticism, rushing ability, and mobility to throw on the run and playoff structure. He can throw consistently well from different arm angles and platforms. He shows the ability to throw with good touch. I think the accuracy and ball placement in the short to intermediate, I would classify as average. Decision-making, functional, average. He shows good competitive toughness. But the things where I have a little bit of pushback on Jaxson Dart, how can he handle pressure? There's a lot of inconsistency in terms of his vertical accuracy and ball placement. I think that would even be more seen at the next level. How quickly can he work through progressions? The mental processing, the pre-post snap reads. The scheme at Ole Miss makes it very easy on Jaxson Dart. And he functions very well in that scheme, but I don't think there's a lot asked of Jaxson Dart. And I think in that regard, that leads open to some questioning, because we know at the next level, they would be put a lot on almost most young quarterbacks' plates. And the scheme wouldn't make it as easy as I think it does for him right now. So I think it's something to at least acknowledge that the scheme I'm not saying makes Dart who he is, because that's not fair to Dart the player, because there are things about him I like, but I do think that it opens up some more areas of question. Is that some of his production and when he looks really good, is it him or is it the scheme? I think it's at least a fair question. I'm not saying it's all the scheme for sure. I put right now his NFL role and fit as a dual threat backup quarterback with the upside to become a starter in a spread offense that utilizes RPO concepts. Obviously, starter, if he goes where I think right now he's a round 3, round 4 projection, I think that's would be hard to become a starter. So I think, when I say the upside to become a starter, that's kind of on the point of where he starts to show more improvement this year and pushes his draft stock up a little bit. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Jaxson Dart could push his way to the second round. And then I do think he's got a chance to emerge into a starting quarterback. But we know how hard it is for round 3, round 4 quarterbacks to emerge there. You get taken around 3, round 4, you're probably being looked at as hopefully a long-term backup. And if maybe the opportunity arises, can they seize that to become the starter? Next up, my number 10 ranked quarterback, Riley Leonard of Notre Dame. I feel like we have been talking about Riley Leonard for quite some time. Obviously, he was formerly of Duke. He's a guy that I think other people, again, you will see people in the industry being a little bit higher on Riley Leonard. There's aspects of his game that intrigue me. I'll start with there. Obviously, he's a senior, now transferred to Notre Dame, 6'3", 221 pounds. Good size and frame. He's got really good athleticism, mobility, and rushing ability, and he's a guy who can take a lot of wear and tear on that when he's rushing. I think the arm talent is average in terms of his velocity and strength. I think the accuracy and ball placement is average as well, but I do think he's got very good ball placement and touch as a vertical passer. I think that's one of his best traits with the athleticism, his ability to push the ball vertically down the field, be very accurate, throw a touch, and his athleticism. I think those are the most intriguing skill sets of Riley Leonard. I think he's a good mental processor to work through progressions quickly. He can play off structure and throw on the red. Areas that I still have some pushback and concern for Riley Leonard: his poise in terms of handling pressure. I feel like when he's got a clean pocket, we could see some of that good stuff that I talked about in terms of vertical passing. I think there's a lot of inconsistent mechanics. I think that is even more heightened when he's facing pressure and he doesn't have a clean pocket. And I do think there's some overall inconsistency in terms of the accuracy and the ball placement. He only played 5 games last year. Besides the rushing ability, which last year in those 5 games, he rushed for 352 yards and 4 touchdowns. His passing numbers were very pedestrian in those 5 games, 1,100 yards, 57.6 completion percentage, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's going to get a much bigger stage now at Notre Dame. Better supporting cast. We need to see him put it together. And if you have one of those years where he puts together a really strong passing year and he still is that dynamic runner, which we know he can be. And I think his rushing ability is almost like a Daniel Jones-like. And I'm not just saying that because like the Duke connection. I think that's the kind of runner. We're not talking about a guy who's going to look like Jaden Daniels or Lamar Jackson out there, but we're talking about a guy who could be in that Daniel Jones, from Andrew Luck to Daniel Jones type of rushing ability. I think Riley Leonard could be like a Daniel Jones in terms of his rushing ability if he could put together a strong passing production year and show improvement in terms of the accuracy, the handling of pressure, and then he adds that to the athleticism, to the rushing ability. Then we're talking about a guy who I think could catapult himself all the way into the round 2 mix. Right now, I put a backup quarterback grade, upside traits, best in a spread offense that utilizes RPO concepts and pushes the ball vertically down the field. I have that round 3, round 4 grade on him, like I did the last few guys, and see what happens this upcoming year. So if you kind of stop here for a second, we're 10 guys in. If you kind of group them together again, Sanders and Beck sit at the top. Ewers in his own tier. Smith, Weigman, and Allar, round 2 guys who I think could get pushed into round 1. And then you have Milroe, Cameron Ward, Jaxson Dart, and Riley Leonard. I have a round 3, round 4 grade on all of them. I think some will drop back clearly into day 3. I think 1 or 2 can emerge and maybe go even earlier on day 2. And maybe, some of them don't even end up coming out or transferring. Obviously, some of these guys got to come out based on eligibility. We'll see about Milroe. Obviously, Ward will be out, Dart will be out, Leonard will be out. But it'll be interesting to kind of see, how this branch. So that's my clear top 10. I feel like if I was going to stop right there, those would be the 10 that I think could have a shot at top 100, even though some of those guys I know I put a round 3, round 4 grade, because I think some of them could, and some of them will easily fall to somewhere on day 3. But I think they have the skill set to at least be in the mix to be top 100 picks. If we go to my 11th ranked quarterback, that is Jalon Daniels out of Kansas. Daniels is the guy who didn't play much last year due to injury, so he kind of had to go back. He only played 3 games last year. Redshirt senior, 6 feet tall, 219 pounds, out of Kansas. Last year, he played 3 games. He had 705 yards passing. In the limited sample size, 70.7 completion percentage, 5 touchdowns, 74 yards rushing. If you went back to the year before, in a full season, he had 2,000 yards passing, 66.1 completion percentage, 18 touchdowns, to only 4 interceptions, a little over 400 yards rushing, and 7 touchdowns. When I look at a guy like Daniels, average size, good frame, good to very good athleticism, rushing ability, and mobility. He shows the ability to play off structure, throw on the run, make things happen when the play breaks down. I think the arm talent is probably just average in terms of velocity and strength. I think the accuracy is good in the ball placement, but I think it's more in the short to intermediate range. I think he can throw with good touch. My areas of concern, obviously the injury from 2023. Is he fully back? Show that he can be durable, especially as a guy who's going to run a lot as well. There's inconsistencies in terms of the vertical ball placement and accuracy. There's inconsistencies in terms of the footwork and the mechanics. I think there's a slightly elongated release as well. So right now, going into this, I have him as a 3rd string or backup quarterback with the upside due to his athleticism, best in a spread offense that uses RPO concepts. I have a day 3 grade on him right now, but understand that a full healthy year, he could be a guy that elevates himself into that round 3, round 4 mix. But right now, I look at him as more of a day 3 guy, 3rd string type quarterback prospect, and see if he can get a chance down the line and maybe work his way to being a backup quarterback at the next level. Let's go to my number 12 ranked quarterback, and that is Graham Mertz out of Florida. Mertz is a guy who I feel like we've been talking about for a long time here at Saturday Sunday. He's been the guy who's been in college for quite some while. It took a winding journey to eventually get to Florida. 6'3", 214 pounds, Graham Mertz. Like I said, redshirt senior out of Florida last year. 2,903 yards passing, 72.9 completion percentage, 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. In Wisconsin, I didn't even think he was a draftable player. So I think the first thing that's important to talk about is he showed a lot of improvement, a lot of development, and a lot of growth from 2022 and before to what we saw last year in 2023. That bodes well for him now, maybe continuing to take that next step and to become a guy who gets drafted maybe somewhere in round 3. Things to like about him: good size. I think the frame is about average. The athleticism is below average. We're talking about a traditional pocket passing quarterback here, but I think he's got good arm talent in terms of velocity and strength. You saw him make tight window throws. You saw him push the ball vertically down the field very effortlessly. He can drive in outside the numbers. I think he's a good decision maker. We saw a lot of growth in the decision making last year. I thought he did a better job showing poise, handling pressure. I think the accuracy in the ball placement went from what was a concern at his time at Wisconsin to now being average to above average in those 2 areas as well. Things that I still, when I look at him, think he's still a clear day 3 or late day 3 prospect. Not a lot of athleticism, not going to do much in terms of playmaking ability, not going to show a lot in terms of mobility. There's still a lot of refinement and growth needed in terms of the mental processing, the reading defenses, his overall pocket presence, showing that he can make anticipatory throws and playing off structure. I just don't see that enough. I don't think he has the top level physical traits. And then I still think there's a lot of quarterbacking, the true quarterbacking traits that also, have not fully developed. I think we've seen improvement, but not enough yet that I think he could be a guy who could push for a top 4 round. I think he's more of a round 5, round 6, round 7 type guy at the next level. I put a 3rd string quarterback. If he continues to show development, he can maybe be a backup quarterback, best in a vertical base passing offense. Next up, my 13th ranked quarterback. I think I'm going to go 15 deep here. The other 3 guys are guys that we talked a lot about in the past. If DJ Olangale, KJ Jefferson, or Grayson McCall show a lot of growth and improvement this year, I'll bring them up a lot on the weekly shows. I think we're going to go 15 deep here. talk a little bit about Tyler Van Dyke, and then I'll round it out with my number 14th and number 15th ranked quarterbacks. So Tyler Van Dyke, this is another guy. I feel like we've been talking about him for a while. Now at Wisconsin, formerly of Miami, redshirt senior, 6'3", 229 pounds. Last year for Miami, threw for 2,703 yards, 63.2 completion percentage, 19 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Not that long ago, there was a lot of buzz that this guy could have been a guy when he was his redshirt sophomore year, that this guy could have been a first-round quarterback prospect. It has not materialized and developed. But just the fact that people were talking about it when they do those way too early mock drafts, like a week after the NFL draft concludes, you start Tyler Van Dyke in way too early round one mock drafts 2 years ago. But that, I think what it does say is there's a lot of traits that teams were intrigued with. Now the development hasn't continued. There's been a lot of stagnant and regression in terms of his traits and characteristics, and that's where we are right now. Hopefully when he going to Wisconsin now, he can kind of springboard himself back into a position to be a draftable guy, to maybe push his way back up. But there are some characteristics and things I like about him, so let's talk about him. Great size and frame, very good arm talent in terms of velocity and strength. He can make any throw. He can put it in the tight windows. He can throw it vertically outside the numbers. He can make those tough throws. He's got really good play strength, toughness, and physicality. He's hard to take down inside the pocket. He's a guy who can, make a big play because a guy thinks he's going to get a sack. He pulls away, keeps his eyes downfield, and make a big play. I think the athleticism is probably just average. Same thing with the pocket mobility. I think the accuracy is kind of stagnated at that average level in terms of his accuracy and ball placement, but I do think it's pretty consistent across all three levels. I don't think he has a particular area where he struggles. Like I've talked about some guys who struggled in the intermediate range. We've seen people have that vertical ball placement and consistency. I do think, while Van Dyke's accuracy and ball placement I would classify probably as just average, I do think it's pretty consistent at all three levels of the field. Things that, I'd like to see improvement on. I'm not sure the athleticism is ever going to get much better than average. So we're not going to get much in terms of the rushing ability. But can he make some plays off structure? Can he be a guy that could throw on the run a little bit more consistently than what we've seen? How can he handle pressure? Do we see better in terms of the reading of defenses, the pre-snap adjustments, reading defenses right after the snap? Can we see more of that? A lot of inconsistency in terms of his decision-making. 12 interceptions, a lot of turnovers, a lot of other turnover-worthy plays that didn't materialize in the turnovers. He's got to cut that back significantly before he's looked at as a guy that a team's going to pull a trigger on at the next level. Right now, I have him classified as developmental quarterback, probably a third-string type guy to start with some upside due to his physical traits, best in the spread offense that pushes the ball vertically down the field. I think he's a day 3 prospect right now. I wouldn't even say early day 3. I'd probably put him, right now around 6, round 7 grade on him if I was really going to, hone in on what part of day 3. And then I think this is a year does he go undrafted? Is he just a flyer in round 6 or 7 because of traits, or do we see some growth and improvement that maybe he can push his way into early day 3? I think that is kind of how this plays itself out. Next up, my 14th ranked quarterback, the redshirt sophomore from Arizona, Noah Fifita. Very interesting prospect. I wrestled with whether or not I even want to do a full report on him because of, right now, so young, the size dimensions, but great year last year for Arizona as a redshirt freshman. He's only 5'10", 205 pounds. Last year, 2,869 yards passing, 72.4 completion percentage, 25 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Obviously, the big factor here is the size is a concern. 5'10", it's not doing him any favors that Bryce Young struggled in his rookie year. He's not the same caliber prospect of Bryce Young. He doesn't have the Alabama factor. Bryce Young was a great playmaker in his own right, not a great runner, but a great playmaker. Fifita's still got a lot of growth to do. I looked at him and saw some Jaron Hall, who I was intrigued with a little bit, but I do think this guy is a redshirt sophomore. I think the odds are low that he comes out, but he did look so good last year that I kind of wanted to incorporate him here. So again, size is the number one concern. I think there's some inconsistency in terms of that vertical ball placement and accuracy. Inconsistent mechanics. You don't see a lot of attack in the middle of the field, which is not uncommon for a quarterback of his dimensions. Handling pressure, not a lot of rushing ability there. Things that I do like about him. Yes, he's undersized. I think the frame is average, so I'm not overly concerned about the frame. I think the athleticism is average. He does have some ability to throw on the run and play off structure a little bit. Accuracy in the short to intermediate is very good to almost great level. The accuracy in the ball placement, short to intermediate, was one of his best calling cards. Really good mental processor, really good at reading coverages and understanding how to make pre and post snap reads. He can throw with really good touch. So there's aspects of his game that are really intriguing. I put a third string quarterback with upside to become a backup, best in a spread offense that moves the launch point for the quarterback. I think that would be critical. It's hard when right now I think that's where his classification is, a day 3 prospect that a team would look at as a third string with the upside to maybe develop into a backup. As the guy who's only a redshirt sophomore, that's probably not a guy who's going to come out. So I included him to kind of get a leg up on him, especially since how good he looked last year. But this would be a guy that I will check in from time to time this year. I don't see a real path for him to come out this year in the 2025 NFL draft. But if he puts together a really strong year and some other guys fall back, maybe he sees an opportunity to be a top 100 guy. I'm not there. I know other people are maybe even like him a little bit more than me, but I do think the size and the dimensions are a concern. And there's some other aspects of his game that I think I still want to see improve upon before, I think it's a good decision for him to come out when he's got 2 years left after this of eligibility. So that's kind of where I am with him. And then my 15th ranked quarterback is Dillon Gabriel, another guy who I feel like has been in college a while. And we've been talking about now he heads over to Oregon to replace Bo Nix and run that offense. So let's talk a little bit here about Dillon Gabriel. Like I said, at Oregon now, 5'10", 201 pounds. Last year at Oregon, 3,660 yards passing, 69.3 completion percentage, 30 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, had 373 yards rushing and 12 touchdowns. Things I like about him. Yes, he's an undersized quarterback, only average frame, but he's got good athleticism, rushing ability, and mobility to throw on the run. He's got very good accuracy and ball placement in the short to intermediate range. He's a really good decision maker, good mental processor. He's got really clean mechanics. He's got a quick release. He's got good poise to handle pressure. Those are the things. Gabriel is a great college quarterback. I just have my concerns about whether or not it's going to translate to the next level. We got the size factor, the age. Does he have the arm talent to push the ball vertically down the field and outside the numbers? I'm not sure it's there. The vertical accuracy and the ball placement. I think those are going to be areas for him that he doesn't have the size and he doesn't have the raw arm talent, I think, for what NFL teams are going to want. So when I look at him, I think he could be a late day 3 guy, priority free agent, smart player though. So I could see him coming in. I think he's a third string quarterback, maybe developmental practice squad guy, best in a spread offense. So I think he right now looks at as a late day 3, but you're talking about a guy who could be in the mix for the Heisman Trophy, right? Like, so it's an interesting dynamic where a great college quarterback in a great system this year, great playmakers at Oregon, is going to put up probably some very insane arcade style college passing numbers. I'm just not, and you combine that with his rushing ability and helping on the ground, I'm just not sure it's going to translate to NFL caliber success and what the NFL teams are looking for. Maybe it's late in day 3, and the team looks at his experience and his ability to run an offense, and they think, he could be our guy as a backup, and we develop him, and maybe he could develop into a backup down the line. I don't think it's impossible because he does have a lot of experience. He's a very smart player. He's got some athleticism and rushing ability. It's just, does the arm talent deficiencies hinder him getting an opportunity at the next level? I think that is what we'll have to kind of find out. So there it is, guys. Detailed scouting reports on my top 15 quarterback prospects. As I mentioned earlier, my 16, 17, 18 was DJ Uiagalelei of Florida State, KJ Jefferson of UCF now, Grayson McCall of NC State. These are guys that we've been talking about for years. They have not shown a lot of development and growth. They've bounced around college now for multiple times. Third time for DJ transferring, Jefferson to UCF now, Grayson McCall leaving Coastal Carolina. If these guys start to emerge as guys who I think have legitimate chances, to go round 5 or even round 6 and obviously higher, I'm going to talk about them more in the show. The scouting reports did not change much from last year. I rewatched all 3 of these guys. I didn't really find myself modifying and adapting my notes too much on what I had on these guys. So, I probably talked about them on last year's show. If you get the scouting notebooks, again, you're going to see very similar scouting reports as what you saw on these guys from last year as well. I'll keep a close pulse on them, especially Ulangale, who once upon a time people thought was a future round 1 quarterback prospect, the next great Clemson quarterback after Trevor Lawrence, never materialized there. He was a guy I was very high on. I thought he had a lot of Dak Prescott college type production and play style, and just hasn't materialized yet. And now he goes to play Florida State, one of my teams that I follow closely. So it's going to be interesting. Ulagale is the guy I'll probably talk about first. I do think his ceiling of those 3 guys is far and away the highest of those guys. But he just hasn't been able to put together a lot of momentum. Even when he left, he showed some growth at Oregon State, and then it kind of plateaued this year as well. And now he's going to take one more shot back in the ACC with Florida State. So there it is, guys. My detailed scouting reports on my top 15 quarterbacks for the 2025 NFL draft. I hope you're enjoying this content. We're going to have 3 more summer scouting episodes. Next up is actually going to be the tight ends. I just had a chance to finish that and conclude that following the quarterbacks. I needed a little bit more time for the wide receivers and the running backs. So you'll get quarterbacks and tight end this week, and then you'll get wide receivers next, and then maybe running backs that same week, if not the beginning of the next week. And we'll make sure we'll get them all in before the start of the college football season. I'm going to see if I can get a guest or 2 on before the start of the college football season as well, just to kind of set the stage for the upcoming college year and get someone else's take on the 2025 prospects, prior to the season kicking off. So if you enjoyed the content, please get over to the website, SS Football, fastest and easiest way to get there. Soon we will be turning the page, changing the notebooks to the new wave of notebooks. Obviously, you can still purchase the old notebooks, has my rankings notebook. If you're still looking for stuff for Dynasty rookie rankings, IDP rookie rankings, overall positional Dynasty rankings, Devy rankings, they're all in that. Last year's scouting notebook is in there. But obviously, at this point, I would say if you're thinking about buying the notebooks, hold out. End of this month, the new wave of notebooks. You can get a head start and get all all these prospects I'm talking about, get all the other rankings and everything else as well. So on behalf of our sound tech engineer, David Nakano, and myself, thank you for joining us. And we look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.